The story, The Killing of Julius Caesar, was first published in the compilation The Celebrated Jumping Frog of Calaveras County and Other Sketches. If you take a look at that in the original version, you'll see that I have made significant modifications to that story. I think Twain was trying to be historically accurate, and so he gave a very complex account of what happened and also used a lot of old Roman names that were quite confusing to me, and so I've simplified the action and the names themselves. The Killing of Julius Caesar, localized. Nothing in the world is so satisfying to a newspaper reporter as gathering up the details of a bloody and mysterious murder and writing them up with an emphasis on the mystery. It's the slant of the story that sets the reporter apart from those who have to work with the same facts. I've often felt regret that I was not reporting in Rome when Caesar was killed, especially for a newspaper that was willing to run a special evening edition in order to get at least 12 hours ahead of the morning paper boys with this most magnificent scoop in history. Other events as startling as this have happened, but none that met all the characteristics of stories we so love today, magnified into sublime grandeur by the high rank, fame, and social and political standings of the actors in it. However, since I was not alive to report Caesar's assassination in the regular way, I can at least imagine it as follows. From the Daily Chariot, March 15th, 44 BC, special evening edition. Our usually quiet city of Rome was thrown into a state of wild excitement yesterday by a bloody scene that sickens the heart and fills the soul with fear. All thinking men must ask, what can be the future of our city when human life is held so cheaply and laws are so openly broken? It is our painful duty as journalists to record the death of one of our most esteemed citizens, a man whose name is known throughout the empire, partly due to the efforts of the Daily Chariot. We refer to Mr. J. Caesar, the Emperor-elect. This was an election battle, only one of a string of ghastly butcheries that have grown out of the jealousies and animosities engendered by these accursed elections. Rome would be better off if her very constables were elected to serve a century, for we have never been able to choose even a dog catcher without a dozen knockdown fights, and without cramming the station house with drunken vagabonds overnight. It's said that when Caesar won the immense majority at the polls and the crown was offered to him, even his amazing unselfishness in refusing it 3 times was not sufficient to save him from whispered insults. These insults, of course, came from such men as Casca of the 10th Ward and other hirelings of the disappointed candidate, hailing mostly from the 11th and 13th Wards. We're further informed that many think the assassination of Julius Caesar was a put-up thing, a cut and dried arrangement hatched by Marcus Brutus and a lot of his hired roughs and carried out only too faithfully. Whether there are grounds for this suspicion or not, we leave to the people to judge for themselves, only asking that they read the following account carefully and dispassionately before they render their judgment. The Senate was already in session. Caesar was coming down the street toward the Capitol, conversing with some personal friends, and followed, as usual, by a large number of citizens. Just as he was passing in front of the D&T drugstore, he observed casually that the Ides of March were come. The reply was, "Yes, they are come, but not gone yet." At this moment, Artemis stepped up and asked Caesar to read a tract or something of the kind. Some later claimed that this was a note warning Caesar of the impending plot. One of the Brutus gang stepped in and asked Caesar to instead read a missive of his own. Artemis begged that Caesar read his immediately, because it was of personal consequence to Caesar. The thug of Brutus insisted that his was the most critical. Caesar shook them both off and refused to read any petition in the street. He then entered the Capitol, and the crowd followed him. About this time, a conversation was overheard that bears an appalling significance considering the events. Pappy Lena remarked to George Cassius that he hoped his enterprise today might thrive. When Cassius asked, "What enterprise?" Pappy only winked and said with simulated indifference, "Fare you well." Then he sauntered toward Caesar. Marcus Brutus asked what it was that Pappy had said. Allegedly, Cassius told him and added in a low tone, "I fear our purpose is discovered." Whatever the exact exchange was, it led to a hushed conversation between Brutus, Cassius, and Casca. Investigators are still trying to discover the details of this conversation. During this exchange, Caesar was talking to some of the backcountry members about the approaching fall elections and paying little attention to what was going on around him. He didn't notice as Caesar's friend Mark Antony was drawn away, or as Brutus with his gang of infamous desperadoes closed around the doomed Caesar. One of the band knelt down and begged that the notorious criminal Publius might be recalled from banishment, but Caesar refused to grant his petition. A war of words began, and Casca instantly seized upon the shallow pretext for a fight. Casca sprung at Caesar and struck him with a small knife. Then the others rushed upon him with their daggers drawn, but Caesar backed up to a statue of Pompey and was able to subdue them all with many blows of his powerful fists. By this time, the Senate was in an indescribable uproar. The throng of citizens in the lobbies had blocked the doors in their frantic efforts to escape from the building. The sergeant of arms and his assistants were struggling with the assassins. Venerable senators cast aside their encumbering robes and were leaping over benches and flying down the aisles in wild confusion toward the shelter of the committee rooms, and 1,000 voices were shouting, "Police! Police!" Amid it all, great Caesar stood with his back against the statue, like a lion at bay, and fought his assailants weaponless, with the defiant bearing and unwavering courage which he had shown before on many a bloody field. But at last, when Caesar saw his old friend Brutus step forward, armed with a murderous knife, it is said he seemed overpowered with grief and amazement and dropped his left arm by his side. Hiding his face in the folds of his robe, he received the treacherous blow without any effort to stay the hand that gave it. He only said, "Et tu, Brute?" and fell lifeless on the marble pavement. We learn that the robe Caesar had on when he was killed was found to be cut and gashed in no less than 7 different places. There was nothing in the pockets. It will be exhibited at the coroner's inquest and will be damning proof of the killing. Later, while the coroner was summoning a jury, Mark Antony and other friends of the late Caesar got hold of the body, lugged it off to the forum, and at last accounts, Antony and Brutus were making speeches over it. They raised such a row among the people that, as we go to press, the chief of police believes there's going to be a riot, and he's taking measures accordingly.